My name is Ilyas Ramani, and on March 18th, 2010, my life changed forever. I was an Imam, a scholar of Islam, a man who had dedicated his entire life to studying and teaching the Quran. Faith was my foundation, my purpose, and the core of my existence. I led prayers at my mosque, counseled those in need, and reminded my community daily that submission to Allah was the only path to salvation. For decades, I never questioned my beliefs. Islam was my truth, my guide, my identity. But then, everything I thought I knew was turned upside down when I was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. At first, I accepted my illness as a test from Allah, a trial meant to refine my faith. I endured the pain with patience, reciting verses of the Quran as I lay awake at night, my body racked with sickness. I continued my daily prayers, fasting when I could, believing that if I remained devoted, Allah would sustain me. My wife, Miriam, was my greatest source of strength, tending to me with unwavering love, always whispering words of encouragement. My children, Yusuf and Amina, visited my bedside every evening, their young faces filled with both hope and fear. The doctors had given me little time, but I clung to my faith, telling myself that whatever happened, it was Allah's will. But nothing could have prepared me for what happened the night my body finally gave out. I had just returned from a grueling chemotherapy session, my body weak, my breath shallow, my heart pounding erratically in my chest. As I lay in bed, a crushing pain spread across my ribcage, tightening like a vice. I tried to call out to Miriam, but my voice wouldn't come. My vision blurred, and I felt a terrible weight pressing down on me. In that moment, I knew I was dying. Darkness crept in from the edges of my sight, the sound of my heartbeat slowing, and then silence. I expected nothingness, perhaps even an immediate judgment before Allah. But instead, I found myself outside of my body, hovering above the room, looking down at the scene unfolding below me. I could see Miriam, kneeling beside my lifeless form, sobbing as she clutched my hand. The paramedics had arrived, their voices urgent as they worked to revive me, pushing down on my chest, shouting medical commands. The room felt distant, surreal, like I was watching a scene in a dream. Yet I felt more aware, more alive than ever before. Then I noticed something else, a light unlike anything I had ever seen. It wasn't just bright. It was alive, pulsating with an energy that seemed to call to me. I felt myself being drawn toward it, my soul instinctively reaching for its warmth. It was unlike any sensation I had ever known, a peace so deep that it felt as though every fear, every burden I had ever carried, was being lifted. For a moment, I thought I had entered Jannah, the paradise promised in the Quran. But that peace was short-lived. Without warning, the warmth vanished. The beautiful light flickered, and suddenly, I was standing in the middle of a vast, barren landscape. The sky above me was blackened, the ground beneath my feet cracked and lifeless. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and a strange whispering surrounded me, low, agonized voices, murmuring words I couldn't quite understand. A creeping dread settled over me. Something was terribly wrong. Then I heard it, a deep, commanding voice, one that seemed to shake the very ground beneath me. Ilias, everything will now be revealed. I turned, and before me stood a massive throne, surrounded by shadows. My breath caught in my throat as I saw who was seated upon it, a figure I had spent my entire life revering. It was Prophet Muhammad, but something was wrong. Muhammad was bound in chains, his expression filled with sorrow and torment. His once powerful presence seemed diminished, weakened by something unseen. My heart pounded in disbelief. How could this be? This is impossible. I cried. You are the prophet, the messenger of Allah. Why are you in chains? Muhammad slowly lifted his head, his eyes filled with an emotion I had never seen before, regret. I, too, was deceived. His words hit me like a blow to the chest. I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. This had to be a trick, a test, something to challenge my faith. But before I could protest, the voice spoke again. Who is Allah? Have you ever truly asked yourself that question? Before I could respond, visions erupted before my eyes, unfolding like scenes from history. I saw pre-Islamic Arabia, the Kaaba surrounded by idols, people bowing before statues of Baal, El, and other deities. I saw how these ancient traditions merged and evolved, how the name Allah had existed long before Islam, once used for many gods, now claimed as the name of the one true God. I watched as the old beliefs shifted and changed, repackaged into something new, yet still carrying echoes of the past. I saw the wars, the conquests, the forced conversions. I saw how scriptures have been altered, reshaped by human hands. Then I saw something that made my blood run cold. I saw Muhammad himself, standing in darkness, pleading for mercy. And in that moment I knew everything I had believed, everything I had taught, everything I had devoted my life to was not the full truth. The weight of it crushed me. I fell to my knees, my entire body trembling. What have I done? I whispered. Then the voice spoke again, but this time it was not the voice of judgment. It was a voice filled with authority, yet love. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. At that moment, something inside me shattered. I had spent my entire life believing that Islam was the ultimate truth, that salvation came through submission to Allah. But now, I was hearing something entirely different, something that felt more real, more powerful than anything I had ever known. And then the darkness collapsed around me, and I was pulled back into my body, gasping for air in the hospital bed. I woke up to blinding hospital lights, the sound of my heart monitor beeping frantically, and the faces of my family hovering over me, their eyes filled with tears. My wife, Miriam, clutched my hand, her lips moving in silent prayers of gratitude. The doctors were in shock. They had nearly called my time of death, yet here I was, fully conscious, fully aware. But I was no longer the same man. For days, I lay in that hospital bed, silent, haunted by what I had seen. My faith, the faith that had once been unshakable, was now in pieces. I could no longer lead prayers. I could no longer speak the Shaidah without feeling a deep emptiness in my chest. Even Miriam noticed my unrest. "What happened to you?" she asked one night, her voice filled with concern. "Why do you look so lost?" I didn't know how to answer her. I had spent my entire life believing a lie. And now, I had no idea where to turn. So I did something I had never done before. I prayed, not to Allah, but to the true Creator, whoever He was. "If you are real, show me the truth." After whispering that desperate prayer, I lay in the hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, waiting, hoping for an answer. But nothing came. No voices, no visions, no divine revelations. Just the quiet hum of machines and the distant chatter of nurses in the hallway. My mind raced, replaying everything I had seen in the afterlife. The Prophet Muhammad in chains, the voices in the darkness, the throne, the history unfolding before me. And then that voice, the one that had shattered my entire foundation. "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." I had spent my entire life rejecting Jesus as the Son of God, believing Him to be a prophet, a man of importance, but nothing more. Yet, in that moment, His words carried an authority unlike anything I had ever known. They echoed deep in my soul, stirring something that terrified me. Could it be true? Had I spent decades believing in a falsehood? For days, I said nothing. I barely spoke to my wife, barely acknowledged the visitors from the mosque who came to pray over me. They were relieved that I had survived, praising Allah for restoring my life, but I could barely look them in the eyes. They didn't know. They didn't know that something inside me had changed, that I no longer felt sure about the words they were reciting over me. The Quran that once brought me comfort now filled me with an uneasiness I couldn't explain. I had read it cover to cover countless times, but now I saw things I had never truly questioned before. I saw contradictions, inconsistencies, and a focus on fear rather than love. The idea that my good deeds had to outweigh my bad ones, that even if I lived righteously, I could still be found lacking in judgment. It no longer made sense. If Allah was truly merciful, why was salvation so uncertain? I needed answers, but I knew that looking for them would cost me everything. In my culture, questioning Islam was not an option. Apostasy was considered one of the gravest sins, punishable by excommunication, or worse. If my family or my community discovered my doubts, my life as I knew it would be over. So I searched in secret, afraid of what I might find but unable to turn back. One evening, when Miriam had stepped out to visit my sister, I reached for my phone and typed something I never thought I would. Who is Jesus in the Bible? I expected to find what I had been taught as a child, that the Bible was corrupted, that Jesus was only a prophet, that Christians had twisted his message. But what I found instead left me speechless. I read about how the Old Testament prophecies pointed to Jesus centuries before he was born. I read about his crucifixion and resurrection, things I had been told never happened, yet were backed by historical evidence. But what struck me the most was not just the events themselves. It was his words. "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Matthew 11, verse 28. "Whoever believes in me will never die." John 11, verse 26. "I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." Mark 2, verse 17. The more I read, the more I realized that this was not a religion of fear, but of love. Unlike Islam, where paradise had to be earned through striving, Jesus offered salvation as a gift, something freely given, not based on merit, but on grace. Tears burned my eyes as I whispered the words aloud. Could this really be the truth? The next morning, as I sat in my hospital bed lost in thought, a man knocked softly on the door. I expected another doctor or nurse, but when I looked up, I saw a Christian chaplain, an older man with kind eyes and a gentle presence. He introduced himself as Father John, explaining that he visited patients to offer comfort and prayer. I should have turned him away, but something in my heart urged me to listen. He sat beside me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. He didn't try to convert me. He didn't rush into a speech. He simply looked at me as if he already knew I was searching for something. And then he opened a small, worn Bible and read, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." John 14, verse 6. A shiver ran through me. Those were the exact words I had heard in my near-death experience. I looked at him, my throat tight with emotion. Why would Jesus say this? If he was just a prophet, why would he claim to be the only way? Father John smiled sadly, because he wasn't just a prophet. He was and is the Son of God. I wanted to reject his words, to argue, to fall back on everything I had been taught. But deep inside, I knew he was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of the decision before me. If I chose to follow Christ, I would lose everything. My standing as an Imam, my community, possibly even my family. But if I ignored what I had seen, if I denied the truth that had been revealed to me, I knew I would be rejecting God himself. At 3 a.m, I got out of bed, fell to my knees, and prayed like I had never prayed before. "Jesus," I whispered, "if you are truly the Son of God, if you are the way, the truth, and the life, then I choose you." The moment I said those words, something broke inside me. It was as if a burden I had carried my entire life had been lifted. I wept, not from fear, not from doubt, but from a joy so overwhelming I could barely breathe. For the first time, I felt free. 2 weeks later, I walked into Father John's church, trembling but determined. I knew what I had to do. In front of a small gathering of believers, I was baptized in the name of Jesus Christ. As the water washed over me, I felt a cleansing, not just of my body, but of my soul. The weight of years of striving, of fear, of rituals that had never brought peace, was gone in an instant. And then the greatest miracle happened. The cancer that had been killing me, the disease that had been declared terminal, vanished. The doctors were speechless. They had no explanation, but I did. I had been healed by the power of Jesus Christ. If you are searching for truth, if you have ever questioned what you believe, know this: Jesus is not just a prophet. He is the Son of God. He is the way, the truth, and the life. You don't have to earn your salvation. You don't have to live in fear of whether your good deeds outweigh your bad. You only have to accept His grace. If this testimony has touched you, share it. Someone out there needs to hear this truth. And if you are still searching, ask Jesus to reveal Himself to you, because I promise you He will.